Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ksenia and I make videos for people who are going through the family immigration process. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to fill out the form I-134, Declaration of Financial Support. This form is used for many different types of visas, K1/K2, fiancé visa cases if that is requested by the Department of State from you. Another reason you might want to fill out this form is for humanitarian parole. This can also be requested from B applicants, F and M applicants. So students, tourists, some DV lottery winners also may be requested to submit this form. So in part 1 of the form, you must first identify why you're filing this form. So if you are filling out this form as someone who applied for a tourist or a student visa and the Department of State is asking you to fill out this form to prove to them that you are able to financially support yourself for the duration of your visit to the United States, then you would check the first box. This could also apply for diversity visa applicants. But if you are a petitioner for a form, for example, I-129F, your fiance may be asked to bring this form to their visa interview filled out by you as their petitioner. So we'll just assume that we're filling out this form on behalf of your beneficiary. If you are filling out this form for yourself, it will tell you which parts to complete. And if you're filling out this form for somebody else, then it also tells you respective parts to complete. So let's continue to part 2 of the form. First, provide the information of the person who is agreeing to support the beneficiary, the individual who is applying for any kind of visa or parole. So if you are proving that you're going to support yourself, then write your name here. And if you are supporting somebody else, so if you are the petitioner, for example, for a fiancé case, then you will write the petitioner's name here. So provide your current legal name, and you are allowed to leave spaces blank if they do not apply to you. You can equally also say not applicable in parts that do not apply to you. Both are acceptable. Next, provide any other names you have ever used on documents, applications, other petitions, and names that maybe they will see on the supporting documents that you will provide for your case. If you don't have any other names, you can simply leave this blank. You can also type in not applicable later on, or you can write it in pen after you print the application. Next, provide your mailing address. If you are able to receive mail at your mailing address, then you can simply leave this first line in care of name blank and provide your mailing address here. And again, if you are a beneficiary who is located overseas and you are filling this form out to prove that you're financially supporting yourself, then here you would type in your foreign mailing address. Next, answer the question if your current mailing address is the same as the physical address. So physical address is where you actually live. Then you can click yes and proceed to the next question. But if you receive your mail at a different address and you actually live somewhere else, then answer no and provide the physical address here. Provide your date of birth and place of birth. Provide your alien registration number if you have one, if you have ever prior had an immigration case. Anybody who is born in the United States does not have an alien registration number. If you are a US citizen who naturalized, you still should provide your alien number here, which can be found on your naturalization certificate. If you are afraid to leave any spaces blank, then you can also write none in pen after you print out this application. Next, provide your USCIS online account number. Same here. If you have ever filed any applications online with USCIS, then you might have an online account number which can be located on your profile. But if you don't have one, you can also leave this blank or write none in pen after you print. Provide your current immigration status. So you could be, like in our case, a US citizen filling out this application for his alien fiance, or you could be filling this out for yourself as a non-immigrant. Then you would check this box, non-immigrant. For immigration status, you're going to have to provide evidence of whatever status you indicate here. So as a US citizen or national, you might provide a copy of your birth certificate or certificate of naturalization, certificate of citizenship, or whatever signifies that you are a US citizen, including the biographic page of your US passport. Lawful permanent residents would need to provide a photocopy of both sides of their green card. If you are a non-immigrant, then you would need to provide a copy of your unexpired visa in passport, if applicable to you. But as a non-immigrant, you may not necessarily have proof of this yet. Next, provide your relationship to the beneficiary. So you could be a family member, a friend, indicate your relationship to this person. If you are filling out this for your fiance, you can write fiance. And then if you are being asked to fill out this application for yourself, then you can simply write self. Next, provide your employment status. Sponsoring somebody else, it is kind of expected of you to be employed or at least have income through unemployment, retirement, or maybe self-employment. Select one of the things that is applicable to you here. If you are receiving your income through disability, you can write unemployed or check the other box. And in pen, after you print out this application, you can write that you are disabled. But in our case, let's say we are employed, indicate the occupation here and the name of employer. You can indicate multiple employers in the additional information section on the last page of this form. You can provide additional employers, just reference the page, part, and item number that you are clarifying. But in here, indicate the primary place with the majority of your income. So let's talk about financial information. We're going to be referencing the form instructions here as well to clarify for us what exactly they're asking for. So in question 13, you need to first indicate how many other forms I-134, I-134A, 864, 864EZ, or 864As have you previously submitted. And you only need to write a number of these forms that you have submitted before if your obligation has not yet ended. To figure out what your obligations are, all the obligations are listed in the form itself before you sign the forms, and also in the form instructions. If you prior submitted the form I-134A for somebody who is now still in the United States, then you are still obligated to support them. You count them here. But if they have departed the United States, or maybe they have obtained a different type of visa and their humanitarian parole has ended, then your obligation ended and you no longer have to count them here. So let's say in our case, we have not submitted any other forms like this before, so we can either write 0 or we can write none. And again, in here, you do not have to count the current form. You only need to count forms that were submitted before. In question 14, you need to include any other dependents that you support, including yourself, but do not count anybody who was already included in item 13. So this number here will be at least 1 because you have to include yourself, but do not include here anybody from this question that we already counted, if any, and do not count the beneficiary for whom you're filling out this current form. So in our case, let's say for example, John will count himself, and maybe John also has a child. So we'll just type in 2. So now we need to elaborate on these two questions, 13 and 14, in question 15. So here we will need to provide the information on all the people that you financially support, and any other dependents. And keep in mind that this is not only asking for people who are dependents on your tax returns. This is asking for anybody whom you financially support. So this could also include maybe children that do not live with you, or maybe you don't have custody of them. But if you do send child support, for example, or something like that, even if those kids don't live with you, or even if you don't claim them on returns, you still have to include those children here. This is not a very strict section, but it does ask you to be honest about how you are distributing your finances. Your form, depending on how many different people you support, may look something like this, and what the relationship of this person is to you might be easy to indicate when you're talking about your family members. But when it comes to writing people whom you have supported on one of these forms, I think it is perfectly acceptable to write exactly what kind of relationship you had to this person. Either way, I don't think it's going to be a mistake to write whatever makes most sense to you in here, so that USCIS can have a better idea in general of how many other people you support, so that when it comes to providing your income information, you are able to meet the income requirements. And speaking of the income requirements, the Form I-134 instructions do not tell you exactly how much you need to be making to qualify as the sponsor. But the general rule of thumb, and based on the very old instructions for this form, the sponsor should be able to meet 100% of the poverty guidelines posted on the USCIS site. But keep in mind that this requirement is only listed for the Form I-864. The form instructions for the Form I-134 no longer reference this chart, but a general rule of thumb is based on the size of your household plus any other people you are obligated to support. Your income should meet at least the 100% poverty guidelines. It should be above this level. Next, provide your current annual income. And in the form instructions, it talks about providing the amount from your IRS Form 1040 or tax return transcripts from the adjusted gross income line, AGI. In this situation, your AGI, if you have a spouse, for example, then the AGI will include your spouse's income. If you have not filed your federal tax returns, you can take your total household income from all lawful sources for the past 12 months and kind of estimate what that income would be. But if you have not filed your tax returns yet, but you have your W-2s that covers the previous 12-month statement, then take your total income, deduct the taxes withheld, and enter that amount as your annual income. And based on what I understand from the form instructions, this can include income from other sources, meaning other members of your household. Type in whatever was in John's AGI in taxes, and that would be his annual income. Provide the information about assets that you have available to you. You will have to attach evidence of these assets, and the form instructions do talk about assets to some extent, but you don't have to attach all assets that you have. You only can attach assets that you wish to be available for the purposes of this form. And in most cases, due to the evidence that you must submit of these assets, most supporters choose to only attach the type of asset that is easy to prove, such as a checking or a savings bank account. Most people choose not to include things like real estate or other personal property, because if you will look at the form instructions, if you are including things like real estate, you must include documentation of ownership a recent appraisal, and the amount of all loans secured by a mortgage. So you would need to provide your mortgage statements. You don't only have to include assets that belong to you. You can also include assets from other people in your household. But in that case, you will have to attach evidence showing the name of the asset holder, description of the asset, proof of that ownership, and what this part means, the basis of the owner's claim for its value, is basically an appraisal or current value or cash value from the bank account. So for example, you can include a checking bank account from yourself. So let's say that John has $10,000 in the bank, and you would need to calculate the total value of these assets. Again, only the assets that you wish to be available. You don't have to include assets if you do not want to include them. Next, you need to answer what other specific contributions you're going to make for the beneficiary to cover their basic living needs. You can either answer yes or no. For fiancé visa cases, you're most likely going to answer yes. And if you are filling out this form for yourself, you do not have to answer these questions. You can skip to part 4. And here you're going to have to describe the specific contributions you will provide. So you can write, for example, housing, medical insurance, transportation, wedding expenses, because obviously your fiancé is coming here to get married, and further application fees. So because your fiancé is coming here to apply for adjustment of status eventually, then you're going to have to support them with that, for example. So some of the more specific things. If you are filling out this application for somebody who is coming here on a humanitarian parole, then you can include some of the same things. You can also, if you are filling out this form for somebody who is going to be a student in the United States, for example, you can also write things like all educational and living expenses if you're planning to help them with paying for their tuition and housing, food, etc. They're called living expenses. In part 3, you need to provide the information about the beneficiary that you are supporting. Again, you only need to fill out this part if you are a supporter who is filling out this form for them. If you're filling out this form on your own behalf, you do not have to write your name and information here again. You already provided it in part 1 of the form. So let's indicate John's fiance here. If Jane has ever used any other names, we can include them here. Again, names that were maybe listed on other applications, supporting documents, government identity documents. Provide this person's date of birth, their gender, alien registration number if you have one, and where this person was born, and this person's current country of citizenship or nationality. If the person for whom you're filling out this application has multiple citizenships, then in here write the country, the passport of which they will be using to eventually enter the United States, or the passport of which they have already used to enter the United States. And then on the last page, you can also clarify if this person has any additional citizenships. Provide this person's marital status. For a situation where you're filling this out for a fiancé visa, then in this case, you're going to indicate whether this person is single, have never been married, or if your fiancé is currently divorced, then you can write divorced. But you wouldn't put married because you have not yet married your fiancé. And then again, if you're filling this out for literally anybody else, then indicate their status here. And provide this person's current mailing address. And when it comes to writing foreign addresses in this line, you can either interpret the address, which means write it the way you would write it in English, or you can translate this address, which means you can literally, letter by letter, just translate the way their address actually is, but write them in English letters. Either way is acceptable. And then also provide if the mailing and the physical address of this person are the same. Like we said before, if they are, skip the next part. If they're different, provide their actual address where they live. Next, this part is asking about the beneficiary's anticipated length of stay. I have tried to do extensive research on what exactly to write in this part because it can be quite confusing for different types of visas. This is what so far I have been able to collect. When it comes to indicating from when your beneficiary is planning to stay in the United States, anticipated means an estimated period of stay, which means that you don't know for sure when exactly they will arrive in the US. If you're filling out this support declaration for your fiance, it is likely that your fiance has already received a consular interview appointment. You can estimate a couple of weeks or a month after the interview date, however long you expect your beneficiary to take to arrive to the United States, assuming that their visa is approved on the day of their interview. So if the consular interview is coming up in March of 2025, you can write that your fiance will be arriving in the United States in April of 2025, and that is totally okay. If you're filling this out for somebody who's going to be an international student here, then this could be the start date of their studies. And then you're going to have to answer when this beneficiary's stay will end. If you're filing this form for your fiance, then you will check the box that says no end date. The ultimate goal of your fiance is to apply for a green card after they arrive in the United States. So you can write no end date. Same would apply for beneficiaries on a diversity visa. So the green card lottery, it is anticipated that you're not going to leave the United States. You're making this your permanent home. And maybe you're filling out this application for somebody who's going to be on a student visa. In that case, you can select this box and write an approximate date of when they anticipate to finish their studies. You could also write D/S, which means duration of status, which is usually what is written on the beneficiary's I-134 when they arrive in the United States. Their student status will be valid as long as they are in school, even if it takes them longer. Someone who is arriving here on a B visa, for example, the longest you can stay is 6 months. So you can provide a date that is 6 months from the day when you anticipate to enter the United States. We are now at the part where you have to provide your statement, contact information, and signature. So if you are the beneficiary filling out this on your own behalf, then you have to check the beneficiary statement, contact information, and signature boxes. But because John is filling out this application for his fiance, we're going to skip part 4 and instead sign part 5. So anytime you're completing this form on behalf of somebody else, then you will skip part 4 and complete part 5. So first select if you can read and understand English, or if somebody interpreted the questions for you. And if somebody else also prepared this application for you, you can select box 2, again only if it's applicable in your case. Provide your phone number and your email address, and then provide the date of your signature, and you must sign this form in a black pen. USCIS does not accept electronic or digital signatures, signatures made with a digital pen. You must do it in a regular pen. So what that means is you must print out this form, sign it, and then have your beneficiary bring a copy of this form to their consular interview. Such would be the case for fiancé cases, for example, or if you are submitting an application for parole, humanitarian parole, on the online USCIS account, where you may also be asked to upload this I-134 and all the supporting documents. Again, it all depends on your personal circumstance. If you used an interpreter, have the interpreter complete Part 6, or at least provide the interpreter's information in Part 6 and have the interpreter sign it. Or if somebody prepared the form for you, have them complete Part 7 and sign Part 7. But because John did not use an interpreter or preparer, we're simply going to leave these pages blank. And finally, we're at our last page. That is the additional information page, where you can clarify any other things that you weren't able to clarify in the form itself. Let's talk about the evidence that is necessary for this form. And it is also outlined on page 6 of the instructions. So this is supporting evidence of your income. But aside from the supporting evidence of your income, you must also not forget to provide evidence of your status, as we discussed earlier in our application on page 2. Now, for evidence of income, assets, and resources, if you are providing evidence of your assets such as checking and savings accounts, we need to provide proof of this. So John is going to obtain a letter from an officer at the bank that includes the information about his account, what was the total amount deposited into his account in the past 12 months, and the present balance. But aside from this statement from the bank, the more information you provide, the better. So you can also include actually 12 months printouts of statements from your bank. To prove your income, if you are employed, you will need to provide a statement from your employer, also known as an employment verification letter, that will talk about the nature of your employment, so your occupation, when you started it, your current salary, and if your position is temporary or permanent. But aside from this, you can also provide 6 months of your pay stubs from this job. In addition, you also are going to have to provide your federal income tax return or a tax transcript. It is preferred to include your tax transcript as opposed to your Form 1040 from personal records. If you haven't filed your tax return, or your federal tax return doesn't reflect your current income properly, then you're going to have to submit maybe your pay stubs, your most recent W-2, or 1099s. This would apply to somebody who is, for example, retired. The adjusted gross income may not necessarily reflect what their income actually is, because it's non-taxable. Then you might want to provide your most recent retirement benefits statement. If you are a business owner, you may have to also provide things like your business license, deposits, a printout from a software that tracks your business payments, such as QuickBooks, for example, Stripe account, for example. And you may also want to include a cover letter that explains your situation. If you are a veteran or a person on disability, you may also have to include things like your disability statements, statement from the Social Security Administration that you can obtain online in your account, also any kind of military ID, DD-214, things like that, to actually show how you are receiving your payments and how you are eligible for these payments. And then if you have stocks or bonds, these are some of the things that you need to include for that. And if you are including assets from anybody else in your household, you will also have to provide proof of these assets with the following evidence. And again, the more information you include, the better. If you are the kind of person who is applying for a non-immigrant visa coming from a different country, you are going to have to provide this kind of information, but perhaps from your home country. And if it's not in English, you are going to have to translate this information into English, and when appropriate, also provide equivalents in US dollars of the values of maybe the resources that you have or the kind of income that you have. So as you'll see on the screen, here's a summary of supporting documents that you may need to provide for your case. So that was basically it. I hope that you found this video useful. I hope that I was able to provide as many scenarios as possible. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I hope to see you guys in my next videos. Bye!